Hi, I want to make a comment about the Trump administration in the winter of 2025 negotiating with Vladimir Putin and the Russians and the Ukrainians with the Ukraine Russia war. I spent 3 years in Russia and have a lot of personal experience dealing with Russians. And I hate to be a Monday morning quarterback with the negotiations and the Trump administration, but I just totally disagree with the route that the Trump administration is going thus far with these negotiations with the Russians. I don't understand why the Trump administration seems to be tough on our friends like Canada, which is not obviously a perfect relationship, or Europe, which is not a perfect relationship anyway either, but seeming to be tough with our friends and trying to cozy up in any way to Putin or our enemies. I do not get it. I can tell you that in terms of dealing with Russians, in my personal experience, they don't negotiate. Negotiation in Russian culture, and you can feel free to correct me if you think I'm wrong, but in my experience, to compromise with Russians, to give anything, is considered an unbelievable sign of weakness and stupidity. They have a completely different mentality when it comes to negotiation. For Russians, negotiation is, in my experience, to completely disregard the aims or the views of the enemy. For example, what Putin's doing with Ukraine, basically arguing that it doesn't exist. This is a classic maneuver in Russian negotiation style. You just belittle the existence of your adversary. And then, or to completely ignore their demands. And above all, to push forward relentlessly, no matter the cost, on either side. That to me is the epitome of Russian negotiation. And you just keep, you might, in terms of dealing with Russians, you might get an agreement to a ceasefire, but it means absolutely nothing to them. It would only be done. It's very difficult for a lot of people maybe to understand the Russian mindset, in my experience. But in my experience dealing with Russians, any agreement that is made is not made in any way in good faith to keep it. It's simply used as a stepping stone for your next advance, to get what you want and to go ahead and press forward again. It's a ceasefire, in my experience dealing with Russians, would be only regarded as a pause, not as stopping or as peace. They will simply return to their lines and go forward again after a certain whatever time is allotted. It's not seen as a legitimate cease. It's just a pause. Russians regard compromise, meaning, in my definition of compromise, means to meet in the middle. They regard that as an unbelievable sign of weakness and stupidity. And they see Americans in particular as unbelievably stupid and silly and unsophisticated. I think that the Defense Secretary Hegseth coming out before the negotiations started and saying, we don't even see NATO as an option for Ukraine. And we don't even see Ukraine getting back to their pre-2014 borders as even a remote possibility. Essentially just Hegseth is making the tragic mistake of anybody who's dealing with the Russians. He immediately gave up his own boundary, his own offense, and went straight to the middle ground, which would be the middle ground in negotiation with the Russians would be giving up NATO membership for Ukraine and giving up Ukraine's 2014 borders. That's ceding what Ukraine would like to have, which is joining NATO and having their borders from 2014 back, and just giving Russia what they want. I don't know how else to say this. This, when dealing with another country, I'm just picking a random country. Say you were dealing with Mexico. That would be considered perhaps a kind and diplomatic. With Russians, it's seen as stupid and weak to give up something prior to even having the negotiations. I mean, they would see that, my God, these Americans are so stupid and weak. They're so silly. I don't understand why the policy of the United States of America cannot adjust out of our mentality of wanting to seek the middle ground and realizing that with Russians, that's not how their mindset works. Negotiation in Russian mindset does not include compromise. It's only done to, how do I say it? Disregard the legitimate wants of the other party and to push forward. Disregard what the other person says, what the other party says, what the adversary says, and push forward, no matter the human cost. You cannot negotiate from a Western frame of mind with Russian people, or especially Vladimir Putin, who's a completely bloodthirsty sociopath. The only language this guy understands is brute force. Victory and defeat. That's it. He does not care about anything to do with meeting in the middle, in the slightest. I do not understand why the Trump administration would cede anything. Putin has lost almost 1 million troops. They're down now in terms of their personnel carriers and tanks and artillery. They've lost so many pieces of equipment. They've lost so many oil refineries. They're now resorting on the front lines to using camels and donkeys. They are weak. If another front was opened against the Russians in a different theater, like in Georgia or China, somewhere in the Baltics, they would have absolutely no chance of winning. They are fundamentally weakened unbelievably. Now is not the time to try to reach the middle ground with this guy Putin. He regards that as unimaginably stupid on the part of the Western countries. I don't suggest approaching the Russians and Putin this way. With anybody who's a total sociopath, they have absolutely no capacity for long-term thinking. It's so unbelievably stupid in terms of long-term planning to involve the North Koreans and making them your closest ally, and Iran. Why does he do that kind of stuff? Because it's in a sociopath's mind, it's something that he believes it's instant gratification. I can be stronger if I just bring these North Koreans in and sign this pact with Kim Jong-un. I can be stronger if I can get these Shahed drones from Iran and make some sort of pact with the Iranians. It is absolutely not a good strategy. Anyone can see that from what's going on in Russia with the hyperinflation and losing millions of your best people to getting out of Russia and trying to go someplace else. Putin doesn't have any long-term planning. He's only seeking immediate control and power and consolidation. I don't understand why the Trump administration would extend an olive branch to this human being. I mean, God bless, but the only way to deal with someone like this, a sociopath like a Hitler or a Putin, Idi Amin in Africa, I mean, these people don't want to get along. They want absolute domination, and they'll do anything to get it. And they have no capacity to feel what's going on with anyone else or have any kind of long-term planning. It's just forward. I would suggest the Trump administration and everybody involved, of course, you want to have open lines of communication with your enemies, but there is no negotiation with Russia. They'll only regard it as weakness and stupidity. I would suggest hitting them as hard as you can in the nose relentlessly until they simply can't go forward anymore. That's the only way to deal with a sociopathic bully. Negotiating is only going to be seen as weakness and stupidity. That's just my experience, and that's my take on it. I wish Trump would stop with this combativeness. And I'm a supporter. I'm no liberal Democrat, but I do not get it. This rhetoric about Greenland, which is just basically a slap in the face to our allies in Denmark. Would you rule out force to take Greenland? No, I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, it's just an absolutely bombastic, idiotic thing to say. Why not talk tough to Putin and be nice to Denmark, who are decent people and have a decent leader? I don't get it. It's just the mark of a bully to cozy up to other bullies and then patronize your friends and supporters. I don't get it. After the plane crash in the Potomac at Ronald Reagan Airport, I was just absolutely appalled by Donald Trump. That is an opportunity to bring people comfort and bring people together. And there is a time and a place to point out the inadequacies of all the DEI bullshit. And everybody's tired of it. But bringing that up right after a plane crashes is not the time to do it. That can come out in the investigation, and it should be done away with in a lot of ways. But the day after a plane crashes and dozens of people die, the people of the country need comfort, and they need to know that this is terrible. We're all with each other, and we're with the victims and the families of the victims. Going into who's to blame and trashing the previous administration is so tacky and, in my opinion, totally un-American. I'm just tired of it. You know, we all want Trump to succeed. We need him to succeed because Biden was awful. We need to have a strong border. We need to have good policies in the federal government that actually function. But being bombastic constantly, combative with our friends, and cozying up to our enemies, and every single opportunity, every single interview I've seen of Trump, and I don't watch them all, but every single one that I've seen, this would have never happened if I was president. It would have never happened. It's absolutely idiotic to have someone in power to keep pointing out that if he had been there, nothing bad would have happened under his watch. Who cares? Nobody cares. That the Biden is gone. He's out to pasture. Stop talking about it and just be reasonable and be good to our friends and stand up to our enemies and comfort the American people and bring them together instead of this constant bombastic, almost barbaric rhetoric that we're going to take this over, we're going to take that over. It sounds like Putin is what Trump is sounding like, and just a jerk. Please stop it. Stand up to our enemies, be good to our friends, and stop trashing the previous administration. It is over. Get over the fact that you lost in 2016 or 2020, and just be decent and hit Putin on the nose and do not cozy up to him. It will only be seen as weakness and stupidity. That's all I got to say.